Discover the Our MedTech Lives podcast, where industry experts share their career stories, key achievements, and insights into overcoming challenges in the medtech field. Hosted by Zilko Rima and Kash Ikram.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Our MedTech Lives. Today, we're absolutely delighted to have the Chief Commercial Officer of BHS Technologies, Peter Gorham, with us today. I'm super excited about this conversation. Peter and I have known each other for years, working in this industry, working for similar companies, and he has a wealth of experience in commercialization of new technologies. So without further ado, welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Kash. What a pleasure to be here.
Welcome, Peter. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, fantastic to meet you too, Silke. Thanks so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. I think we just start with a little introduction. Peter, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into medtech? And we will be surprised if you don't tell us it was by coincidence.
Well, no, I will surprise you and tell you that it was although not always my intention to get into medtech, it was definitely a target of mine. So I started doing a law degree at university, and those that know me will understand that that wasn't really for me. I entered it thinking that I wouldn't be a lawyer, but I thought it was a good degree to get. And midway through the first year, I was sleeping through the property law lectures and just discovered that that really wasn't a career for me. So I switched up a little bit, and while I was at university, I took a job in a mobile phone shop, and this was to pay for myself to go through university. And it turned out that I was pretty good at sales and I was always pretty successful there. But I didn't really love the industry, didn't see myself being in the mobile phone selling industry for the rest of my career. And at the time I lived with a doctor and dentist, and they kind of introduced me to this industry of medicine, pharmaceuticals, and medtech that I really didn't know existed. So I started looking around the industry and found that actually this is a pretty cool industry to be in. And in the sales world, or the sales part of it, you get pretty well looked after. There's a lot of opportunities. There's opportunities to make money, and it's really quite interesting. So pretty early on, whilst I was finishing at university, I made the decision to pursue a career in healthcare, let's say, not necessarily medtech.
And how did you find your first job? Because I think with no experience, it's not always easy to find someone who's giving you the chance to let you in, right?
Correct. And I worked for Carl Storz. That was my first company. And I was pretty lucky that they even at the time, so they were going back to 2005, they were quite forward thinking. So they had an open role for a trainee account manager. So they were looking for someone that I guess had either the experience in the operating room and the experience of medicine or the experience of sales, and thinking that they could train one or the other. So I was the sales guy that they took a punt with. Yeah, I took the role as a trainee account manager, learned from some of the best guys in the industry, followed their careers, still in touch with some of them, most of them today. And then eventually, well, I say eventually, a few months later, took over my own territory, and it all went from there.
But that's luxury, huh? I've never heard someone who was a trainee and really had someone mentoring him. Really never.
Well, really, yeah, like I said, it was pretty forward thinking, and it makes a lot of sense. I think when you're dealing with the type of equipment that we deal with, that when you go from being a mobile phone salesman one day to being on the shoulder of a surgeon the next, advising them how to use equipment on a live patient, there probably should be some gap of training. And unless you have really deep training programs, which weren't developed at the time, that way of doing it, I guess, was the only way available.
Yeah, it's to start at the big companies, they have these sort of apprenticeship, junior positions where you can learn. I started in pharma. They gave me some amazing training, but they gave you a script and you had to stick to the script. You couldn't deviate or, pass go. You didn't get 200. It was very restrictive. Remember when I first joined Zimmer, my first real orthopedic company, and I asked my boss, where's the script? He said, what are you talking about? you have your brochure. We don't employ people in short trousers, is what he told me.
Right.
You know what that means, right? Get out there and figure it out yourself. And it was like a release of freedom. I was like, oh, wow, I can put together my own sales pitch. So
Right.
that was the start of getting creative and meeting the needs of that individual customer rather than lodging into this memorized script that we had to go through.
Extreme, right? Once you have the script, but on the other hand, you said you have the full freedom. But with full freedom, I think then the message depends on the sales rep and not on the company. So
It's,
your colleague can give completely different messages. So I think that can be also dangerous.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think there's a definite middle ground to be had. In my role now, I think achieving the playbook for what we do is kind of the dream scenario, but we also don't want robots to go out and sell our robots. We want people who can build relationships that are long term, and that's very difficult to do via a playbook or script.
I can see you as a lawyer, but I'll tell you why. Because they always think you look like Bob Odenkirk, the guy who plays Better Call Saul or from Breaking Bad, right? Or nobody. You look just like him. He's a lawyer. I mean, I'm not sure you're going to, maybe you'll be a lawyer in his ilk, right? Better Call Saul.
I'm pretty sure he's an actor, not a lawyer.
Yeah. When I see him on TV, you always pop into my head. I'm like, oh, there's Peter.
I really
Peter's
don't know,
looking like
Joker, if I've just been insulted or paid a compliment there.
Or nobody. You could be a former assassin.
Coming back to your first company, Peter, what I saw in your LinkedIn profile, so you spent the first years in sales, as you just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
and then you changed and started in marketing. How did this happen and why? And did you enjoy it?
So this was rather by accident than design. Actually, that was when I made the move to the Middle East, which was a lifestyle-based decision rather than a fully career-based decision. And the opportunity came up for this marketing role. Upon reading the job description, essentially it looked to me like a sales role via distributors. And that was definitely not the case. It was a marketing role in an indirect market that was very hands-on. But the change came because I wanted to make that move and do something different and live in a different environment and experience different cultures. I don't think I was quite prepared for the range of cultures that I was going to be exposed to, but that was definitely the aim, not the specific career path.
So would you have accepted the region if you would have known?
Knowing what I know today, 100%. At the time, well, I kind of did know. Thinking about my younger self, maybe not. If I knew what I would go through, maybe not. But now, absolutely 100%. I'm so proud of some of the things that I've done, and it's entirely shaped my career. That move, those early days in that move, has really, really shaped my career.
Yeah, and also the med device industry geographically has evolved at different rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you were out there, it was really early days, right? They were, maybe back in the early 2000s, the 80s and 90s, they were buying low cost products from the East, but then they started to invest in high technology. They started to hire in surgeons and medical practitioners from more advanced countries and really ramp up especially in Dubai where you were, right? A lot of the new hospitals were built. They built the medical city. They really, the pace of development was rapid and you had to stay like on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to such a range of different countries as well that we were dealing with different stages of the med device cycle in different countries and even within different regions within different countries. So if we take Oman, for example, this is a fantastic country, one that I've visited dozens of times, but they have one major city in Muscat and then several other smaller cities. And outside of Muscat, everything was really quite basic, but there was a willingness to learn and a willingness to invest, but it required the investment of your time and your patience to do that. But the results were there at the end, and that was always really rewarding.
Yeah, I remember going to Kuwait after the war and they were investing heavily, right, in modernizing and building up their healthcare infrastructure. They brought in some top doctors from Eastern European countries, and they were like, right, the pace of change was incredible. And it was great to see that. And it's always an exciting aspect, right? To see that
Yeah,
rate
definitely.
of change happen. Yeah.
Definitely.
And there was a lot of, in that region, there's a lot of medical tourism, i.e., the governments or even the individuals come to Europe to have their surgery done. And there are specific hospitals set up in Europe that really do a lot of that. Like I'm thinking Cromwell in London, for example.
Yeah.
You must have seen a lot of that. But I'm thinking that now that's beginning to tail off as the home countries are as good, if not
It's
better.
the other way around. I
Yeah.
mean, aesthetics, we see a lot of people going there now.
You're 100%
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Turkey, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. You just go to Istanbul airport and I got to 37 counting the number of gents with a hair transplant before I
Yes.
gave up and thought it was a boring
Nose,
game.
nose, no, I got it. It reminds me, I need to book my nose job at some point. Make a note here.
Yeah, definitely saw that. I
Yeah.
was at a great stage, again, going back to Oman, seeing their doctors saying, we don't do these patients because they go abroad. They get paid to go abroad. They get given pocket money to spend. They get business class flights. Their family goes with them. They get spending money. Everything is paid for. Everything is taken care of. So they don't want the surgery here. They want it in Munich. They want it in Cleveland. They want it in London. They want it in Sweden. But meanwhile, the doctors, the young Omani doctors or the young Emirati doctors were in Canada, they're in Australia, they're in America, they're in the UK training, and they started coming back. And these
Yes.
guys really came back full of passion for their country, full
Yes.
of passion for the healthcare, and that was really inspiring. I worked with a pediatric surgeon by the name of Dr. Noor in Oman, mentioned that country again, and I purely anecdotally estimated she was the biggest expert in the world on pediatric splenectomy. She was taking out enormous spleens
Yeah.
laparoscopically from children
Wow.
because there
Wow.
was a huge number of kids with sickle cell disease in
Yes.
Oman. And that's very specific to that region. And this was a lady who trained in Canada, came back, was just a fantastic surgeon. And that was a great example of seeing the shift in, okay, we take our Omani patients abroad to bring trained Omani doctors back to Oman and operate in there.
But if you take the Emirates, for example, like Dubai, they brought in so many expat workers from different countries. They're not going to send them abroad, right? And if they're coming from Philippines, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they also expect to get high-end healthcare in Dubai. So those hospitals had to build up a bit, right? I'm not talking about the low-end work, but the number of people who have come into those countries. What do you think from being there?
It was always the strangest market to read, the Emirates,
Yeah.
because a lot of the locals, if they needed surgery, would go abroad.
Yeah.
And a lot of the expatriate workers, if they needed surgery, their insurance was always at the basic level. They would often go abroad as well. And surgeons that I knew very well would say to me, should the worst happen, go home. Yeah, I think I left
But
at the beginning of COVID.
to the NH.
So I think the NHS is pretty bad at a lot of things, but it's also very good at serious stuff.
Yeah.
And if you've got a football injury, you'd probably be fine in Dubai.
Yeah.
I used to call the hospitals baby factories because
Okay.
there was a lot of people who would go out there at that age range of,
Yeah.
they would go out there single, they would meet someone, marry, and then children come along. And that
Yes.
was their requirement for healthcare. At the time, when you reached the age of 65 or retirement age, you couldn't remain as a resident. You had to go home.
Right.
So
Right.
there wasn't that great need for standard illness healthcare because
Right.
of the age and health of the population. So
Right.
there's certain aspects like trauma surgery that was quite big, a lot of car crashes, obesity surgery, huge, aesthetic surgery, huge, and obstetrics.
Yeah.
And other things are growing and have grown a lot since I left the country in 2020.
I would be interested in knowing more about the culture within the company. Did you experience cultural differences when working in Europe compared to working in Dubai?
Yes and no. I did work for a German company and I definitely felt that. And I've had these conversations recently with people that working for a local company, I think perhaps is wildly more different to working for a German company, even with more regional colleagues. I was the only European within the Storts family at the time, a family company. We had two offices, one in Beirut, where everybody was Lebanese, pretty much. One was at home, so that was normal. And then we had the satellite office in Abu Dhabi, where everybody was an expat. And we had a range of nationalities, and I was the only Western one throughout. But honestly, there was the expectation that you would be at your desk unless you were at a hospital, which I found quite strange, that level of productivity wasn't relevant. It was to be seen to be productive, or it appear as if one is productive rather than genuine productivity that was more important.
Yeah.
But generally, the culture within the company was very good, and we had really good management who was very thoughtful, very open to suggestion. But I think I saw huge differences. And like anything in a new country like the UAE, things evolved at a pace. You know, it changed the weekend while I was there. It changed the culture from this break in the middle of the day. That disappeared while I was there. So when I arrived, you would try and call the distributor at 2 p.m. and they'd be at home having lunch, and they'd be off until 4 or 5 o'clock, and then they'd work till 9, 10 p.m. The European company, we didn't operate like that. We operated at normal times.
Yeah. So for the uninitiated, Karl Storz, so what kind of products were these that you were selling?
So Karl Storz is a manufacturer of instruments for minimally invasive surgery and ENT plus imaging systems. So a German company, probably unique in its own culture in that it is family owned, 100% family owned. It was run at the time by Mrs. Storz, the daughter of the owner, Karl Storz, and it was in many ways a fabulous company. Excellent products, and most of the time a very good, calm environment to work in.
Yeah, it's known for its quality and high-end imaging equipment. So we're talking about cameras that image inside the patient so you can do laparoscopic surgery. So was that so? And I see that from there you went to work for Novodaq when Novodaq was acquired by Stryker, right? So
Yeah.
for those who don't know, let us tell people what Novodaq is, and how you went to Stryker then, another high-end company.
Yeah. So really some of the best years of my career
Yeah.
that you just mentioned there. I'm lucky to have lots of highlights, but Novodaq to Stryker really was one of those. Novodaq was the pioneer of ICG imaging in surgery. So it was a spin-off company from a PhD project.
Yeah.
Where, yes.
Rick, man, I know him well.
So
Yes.
Rick was
Yeah.
looking at the impact of drugs. I
Yes.
can't remember which drugs on the heart.
Yes.
And in order to view this impact, he wanted to look at the blood flow. So he discovered that there was this technology of indocyanine green, which fluoresces under near infrared light. I'm going to pat myself on the back for remembering all this without doing
Yes.
any kind of research. I'm not a scientist, and I think I made myself sound like I knew what I was talking about.
Yes.
And somebody said to him, "You've got the makings of a company here." In essentially a side part of his PhD, he developed this technology, brought it in, and made it happen. And they developed this initially for cardiac surgery. And the way the story goes is that they were doing some cardiac surgery, and a plastic surgeon came along and said, "What are you doing?" "We're looking at blood flow." "Well, I'm pretty interested in blood flow because I want to see if there's blood flowing into my flaps after I reconstruct whatever it is I'm reconstructing. Okay, let's give it a try." And then suddenly they could see blood perfusion, and it grew from there. and I'm sure many of your watchers and listeners are familiar with ICG imaging now, it is pretty much the standard in colorectal surgery. And that was all down to Novodaq. They really pioneered it.
They're big in gynecology, robotic surgery.
Yeah, it's
So
used in lymphatics as well as blood perfusion.
I met Rick Mangat. He's a Canadian chap. I was doing a tour of Asia, China and Hong Kong and Korea with a local distributor that also distributed Novodaq back in the early days. So I'm there carrying Litco. Rick is carrying Novodaq, and we became friends as we toured Asia together. And when I joined Covidien, I was telling Covidien, we should buy this little company, Novodaq. It's got some great technology. And they were like, yeah. So when they eventually sold for 770 million, something like that,
right.
it was, and I was like, I told you we should have bought this when there were like 4 people in the company. So I think it's amazing technology. And like you said, it is now used universally in so many procedures. It's pretty amazing. So that must have been fun in 2016, 2018 to really drive that,
great.
right?
This was my introduction into so many things, startup culture, American business, really, and North American MedTech culture. It was a real switch for me to sell purely scientifically. And that really flicked the switch for me, because previously, when selling imaging systems, it's a case of my screen is bigger than your screen, or my camera chip has more pixels than your camera chip. And that's cool. And it's great tech, and you can see it, and it makes a difference. But when you're going into an OR and you're saying, we are improving clinical outcomes, and there's the evidence, I mean, that for me really opened a lot of eyes. So again, lifelong friends made at Novodaq. I'm still in such regular contact, and then have repeatedly worked with some of the team again and again subsequently. But you talk about Medtronic potentially acquiring Novodaq. They acquired Quest instead.
Yes.
I don't think there was a better acquirer of Novodaq. Forget the money and Stryker. They've done wonders with the technology. They respected the manufacturing and the R&D of Novodaq too, and brought them in a really great way. They respected the team and the knowledge that Novodaq brought. They understood that their team was selling in a different way and they needed support.
Crucial learning for you, though, wasn't it? That you basically, great learning that you learned how to launch a product into a market that didn't exist. There was not an existing market structure. The hospital didn't have a budget for ICG imaging, right? That they were like, oh yeah,
correct.
We have this budget, we can spend it on you, right?
Correct.
You had to go there and ask them to create budgets, to create reimbursement codes, right?
Yes.
And to launch a product that no one had ever used really before, right? Persuade people of new concepts. When you're launching a product that's not really been used before, how do you persuade customers to try something? Doctors are pretty conservative in a lot of ways, right? Well, how would a company go about launching something that's completely new out of the...
I think it's a pretty standard response, and I hope you don't think it's too boring, but it's about identifying the right people. And there are people out there who are open to these technologies and have these ideas in their head already that this is what they should be able to do, and are potentially actively looking for that sort of technology. So it's about identifying those people.
Yes.
It sounds maybe a little bit corny, but you know, with time in the industry, you do build up a network. And when you're so focused, as I was, on minimally invasive surgery, on laparoscopy, you do know these people. You know, you spend time in the operating room, you spend time at conferences, you meet people, and you have this network, and you can identify people. And it's about identifying the right ones, going to them in the right way, and explaining it. My colleague did a fantastic job of that at Novodaq in building the science. And that was really, really critical. With something like ICG imaging, it's not just a magnifying glass or a pair of tweezers. It's got to have proven clinical outcomes. And
Okay.
while there is always going to be debate, there was a very clear evidence that it was safe, for one, and that it was improving clinical outcomes. And I can't take the credit for that. I wasn't the one behind the clinical trials at Novodaq at all. They did a fantastic job developing early stage medicine.
So you develop clinical studies to prove that this thing is more efficacious than what they're currently doing.
Yeah. And then user groups, and got people talking about it, even amongst themselves, even if it was a fan club of 10 people to begin with. You create an environment that people wanted to be at. People wanted to be at the podium, at the table. It was very clear that it was going in the right direction.
That's not boring at all. Silke.
Nothing is boring so far. And I think the next chapter is, for me, even more exciting, because then you started the robotics, right? The robotics chapter. How did this happen? I mean, you mentioned several times having a network. How did it happen that you moved to robotics, which is completely different? And I'm asking this because today what I see is that people look really for someone with this specific experience, and they even go down to a product knowledge experience, which I don't understand, because I think once you build businesses and teams, you can have a lot of transferable skills. So can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, sure. So after the acquisition of Novodaq, I was at Stryker, and many of us from Novodaq ended up in similar roles. I think outside of the US, I was probably one of the luckier ones to be involved in a really interesting role in Stryker, so was pretty happy there. But then I got the tap on the shoulder from a former Novodaq colleague, actually my boss directly, Matthias, and he'd got involved in this crazy early stage startup based in still EPFL, the technology university, world famous technology university in Lausanne, Switzerland. And we'd enjoyed working together, and it was his idea that we begin our collaboration again. And I thought long and hard, maybe 30 to 60 seconds about the opportunity, and said, yeah. My feeling was, you will not get another chance to join a startup in surgical robotics at this stage ever again in your career, and you have to take those opportunities. I could easily still be at Stryker, could easily be paid more than I am paid right now.
Yeah.
So flying business class around the world for just one of the world best employers in medtech with fantastic, intelligent colleagues, or you can take the plunge into the unknown, into something that you will never ever get the chance to do again. And so I wasn't going to turn that down.
Well, I was trying to hire you at the time. My company, Medtronic, was taking too long, and next thing I knew, you were at Distal Motion.
Yeah.
So I was happy for you, but I was a little sad to not have hired you myself into my team.
Likewise, not working together is a strange one, Cash. Maybe one day, or maybe we're destined just to bounce things off each other.
Absolutely. Well, you've been there all the time to bounce ideas off and chew over ideas. And then long may that continue.
Yeah.
But this was a fascinating. I think you go from launching a new technology like Novodaq, which you really nicely explain the process of creating evidence. So it proves that this is better than what they're doing and adds value. And then growing that from a small group to becoming a worldwide used product. And again, this was the skill set that you brought to Distal Motion, right? In terms of their two-arm robot that they were competing against, probably the best medical device company in the world, Intuitive Surgical, and their robot. This was a tough gig, right? To enter into a market which is dominated by one huge player with a real state-of-the-art product. How do you start to eat that elephant?
You don't. Is the short answer. I think it's almost impossible to meet Intuitive head on. I've consulted multiple times on surgical robotics since, and I always say the differentiation is key. And having a product that offers a different value proposition to Intuitive is absolutely critical, because if you offer the same value proposition, it's almost impossible to compete against.
Yes.
And when you develop a surgical robot in Switzerland or in Europe, then in Switzerland, price is not the area that you are likely to be able to really differentiate on. As we all know, is very different to price.
You can see by Silke's Swiss shirt and my UK shirt, the difference in price is very clear.
But Peter, I mean, you just mentioned that you were consulting as well about robotics, and I saw that you did your MBA thesis about the question, should NHS invest in surgical robotics? Yeah. And I would be super curious to hear the answer from you.
At the time, of course, it was somewhat ambiguous at the time. So I think I did that in 2016. So a very, very different period. That was prior to me hearing of distal motion. I knew that there were competitors in the market. I knew that there would be further competitors, but at the time there was only intrasurgical. And my approach was understanding whether or not the NHS at the time should be part of the development process. Is there a responsibility on the shoulders of a national health service such as the NHS in the UK to help develop technology? And yes, I think they should be pioneers in pushing boundaries in technology. They should support new technology, because if you're a late adopter, then you're not helping develop that market. If you take front center stage as an early adopter, you can help drive that, and that's only going to benefit the NHS long term. At the time, there wasn't any substantial evidence that robotic surgery was improving surgeon outcomes. There was still huge debate around the prostate. And my major conclusion was that it was more human factors that influenced the outcome of surgical robotic cases at the time than it was technological factors. At the time, it was £2 million to acquire a surgical robot. And if you're a surgeon in the NHS and you ask someone to spend £2 million on you, you better be sure that it's going to be successful. So how do you do that? Well, basically focus on that product. So that means becoming a subspecialist of becoming a prostate surgeon and doing only prostates with the robot. And when you sub or super specialize like that, guess what? You get better at things and your outcomes improve. Can we ever say that's down to the technology or the surgeon? I'm not so sure, and I certainly wasn't sure at the time. But that was my conclusion, that it was a lot of human factors. That's not the only one, but a lot of human factors involved in improving outcomes with robotics. But from the technological standpoint, I thought that the NHS should be, yes, trying to push boundaries somewhat. I'm not sure that they are, but there we are.
That's incredible. So your career has also paralleled the process of putting a computer between the surgeon and the patient, right? So even at your early days working at Storts, where it was imaging, yes, there was electronics involved, but maybe not too much thinking. And then those computers, through the form of robotics, have started to evolve and get better and better, to your current role, BHS Technologies, right, where you've got a robotic surgical microscope, essentially. So tell us a little bit about this, because this is amazing technology.
Yeah, this is super cool. We're a company founded by guys who were MedTech guys, and they worked developing products such as cochlear implants. They were working with microscopes to develop a product that would be inserted into a patient using a microscope. So they fundamentally understood visualization and magnification, and they understood the shortfalls of the products that were out there right now, certainly in terms of ergonomics, practicality, digitalization. And they had an idea that they could improve what is already out there and have developed Robotic Scope. So yeah, I'm sat here in Innsbruck in our HQ. Fabulous city, if somewhat difficult to reach, as my colleagues will know because I tell them frequently. And we are 8 years old and pretty well developed. We're a global medical device company now, selling to all corners of the world. If not every country, then certainly all corners. Yeah, and really exciting technology. Again, quite disruptive because we've detached the surgeon from the microscope, and it takes quite a lot to take somebody away from what they've really been used to for their whole career. And in that in itself provides a challenge. And I'm sure a lot of people in medtech will understand that if the more junior, younger surgeons are the ones that want to get hold of your technology, then that's great. However, it's not necessarily them that make the decision to part with the money for the hospital. And then making that leap is a challenge. So that's a different one from persuading someone scientifically that this is an improved system. We're extremely well received by surgeons. They love the device. And we all have challenges in our company, and ours is slightly.
So what does the device do, and which kind of surgeries is it used in?
Essentially, it's a surgical microscope. So it's used wherever surgeons need magnification, mainly neurosurgery or neurospine surgery, ENT, and plastic surgery. But we also do some head and neck, trauma surgery, some urology and pediatric surgery. We just had a case or a study published from Dubai, funnily enough, on cleft palate surgery in kids. Really a fabulous publication. Yeah, a really different set of cases to what we normally have.
I have a question for this. Because I was in a company as well where the market was not so clear. I mean, when you are in cardiac surgery, you visit cardiac surgeons, full stop. But as you just described, you have such a big market and might have limited resources because you are a generation one company. So how do you open new markets? Would you go for specific areas, but go to all the specialists? Or would you say we go for one specialty, but in all of the countries? What is your approach?
I think, honestly, Silke, that's a fantastic question. And it's something that's really relevant and we talk about very much. We have a product that you could scattergun approach the whole world, the whole market. And I think we all know that that is not a successful strategy. Focus is really, really important to us. And it's one of the challenges is having the confidence throughout the team to be focused. When presented with the opportunity to go broad or narrow, it's a lot easier to go broad because you feel like you have more people to talk to, more conversations to have. But the reality is you need to be focused, and geography matters. We've seen that. Our surgical discipline split is really geographically measured or shown. I'm not getting the right English word. And it takes some pre-thought, and it also depends on market opportunities as well. So we have both direct and indirect sales. And if we are selecting a new distributor in a new market, it may be the market we go into may be slightly opportunistically driven based upon the competences of the partner, because it's rare that you would find a distributor in medtech who is super specialized in neurospine, in ENT, and in plastics. So that might dictate somewhat your entry into that market. What we do have, though, is a kind of a Trojan horse product that you can introduce into a hospital, into neurosurgery, and then expand that into plastic surgery, for example. Now, whilst that may not be the revenue spinner for a company like ours, because we're a capital product with not a huge amount of consumable element, it does allow us to build that reference center, which is what is key in a business like ours.
Yeah.
It's really key to work very, very closely with these initial hospitals.
And I think it also comes to marketing, right? You don't have unlimited marketing budgets. So the question is also, which conferences are you attending? Where do you spend your money? Are you doing social media or printed or PR? So what is your approach there?
Yeah, that's very, very true. So we have quite a narrow focus on our Congress attendance. We try to do the national congresses in our direct market and more local congresses. Personally, I think that focusing on the more local events and to national level events is much more beneficial to a company like ours, because you can go to the best, highest quality international congress and be overwhelmed with leads from a country that you cannot respond to. And the limitation in resources is key in responding to leads in the right way, as well as attending the conferences in the first place. Whereas if we go to the national congresses, we're pretty much guaranteed that the people that we meet will be from that region, that country, and we know that we've got the capacity and the personnel to cope with that.
Yeah. Who are your competitors? Do you have competitors with similar technology, or are you competing with non-robotic microscopes essentially?
Essentially, we work in the microscope market. So Zeiss, Leica, Mitaka, and then there's the exoscope market as well, which is quite new, where companies have gone, hey, I've got a laparoscope that works outside the body. If I just adapt it, it's a microscope. And that's very crude of me to say.
Yeah, I hear you. It happens. Yeah, product extensions like that. That's fascinating. As chief commercial officer, right? You're looking for, and this is a tough product to sell. It's high-end capital, right? Which typically means with the price points that you have, you're going to end up super high up in the hospital decision, even in the C-suite of the hospital, right?
Absolutely.
Before they can spend that kind of money. They want to look at leasing. They want to look at deals. You may even have to talk to some local politicians to fund this kind of technology. So when it comes to talent, what are you looking for in people who can come on board and market a new technology which has a high ticket price and is technologically quite advanced as well? Who are the people that you bring on?
So
What are you looking for?
I think I look at that in a two-stage way. In the earlier days, I wanted to bring people in who had the experience of doing something similar with capital disruptive technology, because you kind of need, like I said, the confidence to build a strategy to sell in a focused way. I think enthusiasm alone won't help you in that market. And now we've got to a stage with our team where we can probably take a few more risks with hiring people. And I would consider, in fact, we are looking to hire people with that raw enthusiasm. We've got the confidence in ourselves now, the confidence in our product, our training structure, our experience in the operating room, that we can add that. So in kind of the same way that I was introduced into the industry, I would consider taking people on who really wanted to break into this industry and brought with them a lot of personality, cultural fit, and enthusiasm. Culture plays a big role in what we do here at BHS. It's really important to us that you can fit right into that.
Fantastic. And you've basically seen the world through your career, right? Other people have paid for your plane tickets to go and see these fascinating places that you've been to, like that you mentioned earlier, Oman, Middle East, Pakistan.
Yeah.
And now you're global, right? So are you traveling the world still?
I am very much so. Yeah, I've done some quite incredible trips with BHS, but you're right, throughout my career. So I've gone to countries like Iran, like Pakistan, Bangladesh, that perhaps I wouldn't have gone to as a pure tourist. Although now I would recommend to people to go as a pure tourist, having been. Then we've spent time in Chile, Saudi Arabia this year, all over the US, but still haven't been to some countries. So I have this conversation quite frequently. You know, I've never been to New York. Never been to New York. I've never been to Australia.
That's not exotic enough for you, right?
Yeah. So, like, I must have been 6 times in Dakar. I've been 15 times in Iran. I did business in Kathmandu, in Sri Lanka,
Amazing.
all over the Middle East and North Africa, many times in South Africa, now Latin America. I've been all around Southeast Asia.
Wow.
Never to New York.
So if you like to travel, this is a good career for you as well, right?
Yeah, it is. I tell you, it takes an understanding partner, and
Yes.
it takes a lot of teamwork to be able to facilitate the job that I do.
Yeah.
And right now is a period where I do have global responsibility, and we are rapidly growing, and resources are not free flowing. So I am on the ground frequently, and need to be sometimes short notice on travel.
Exactly.
So it takes a very understanding partner for me to be able to do that, especially with so many children.
And in your early career, the smaller the company, the more chance you're going to have to travel, right? Big companies, you're going to have a specific region or territory that you cover, but smaller companies,
Yeah. The lower the class of travel, as well as the more likelihood of exotic and interesting travel, but
yeah,
you're definitely turning right.
Peter, you mentioned you are in a global position, but I also saw your team means commercial, clinical, education.
hmm
So these are very different personalities, I guess. So how do you encourage international and cross-functional communication in your team?
Well, I think I'm blessed with a really good open team. I would love to take all the credit for the openness of communication between the different teams within my team. But really, it goes down to the personalities and maybe the culture of the company. It is a very open culture here. We have 4 base of employees here in Innsbruck, where we have those specific verticals, and then our remote team are clinical sales or clinical support and our sales team. And we have regular meetings. It's really important to keep in touch with those remote guys. It's for them, they can struggle to feel part of the organization. I know I've experienced that before, particularly during COVID, when you're really detached from a business working at home alone. It can be really tough.
Not when you work for cash, then you travel during COVID.
You'll never
He was
forgive me.
traveling. He was locked
Never.
in Sweden and his team was traveling. No, never.
Yeah,
Tested every 48 hours. We will never forget that.
We had the customers couldn't come to us, so we said let's stick the Corindus robot in a van and take it to them. And literally, the team member would tour the country, then drive to the border, where another colleague will be waiting to take over the van and drive it
really,
through the
wow.
next country.
PCR tests.
Yeah.
Oh God, a lot. But we sold a lot of robots while everybody else was sitting at home, and including me.
Yeah, he was locked in Sweden and we were traveling. So
Yeah,
this is the
I was
lucky
locked in,
boss. But
but it
coming
was
back to
very
the point,
successful.
I mean, when you talk about meetings, are you talking about virtual meetings still, or are you talking about face-to-face meetings?
We encourage both. It's important to be face to face, in my opinion, at every single opportunity, which is why I'm here in the office today. I could technically do everything remotely, but it makes so much more sense to be in the office.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
100%.
encourage our remote team to travel here as frequently as they can. And if they've not, we have a fantastic showroom here. So part of our sales process is bringing surgeons, clinicians, nurses, administrators here. And if the team don't have those people to bring, then we encourage them anyway to come to be part of the culture. We do regular events. We're in the middle of the Alps, so you know what these people are like. They love throwing themselves off mountains or climbing up them. So we always have company outings that involve something to do with a mountain and something to do with beer. And we try and get remote employees to join as many of those as we can.
Plenty of melted cheese as well.
Yeah,
It's a lot
yeah,
of
indeed.
stars as well, right? It's a bad.
Yes.
Yes.
Although I don't really tend to experience that type of hotel when I stay in Innsbruck. My wellness it tends to be more free. For example, 6 a.m. bike ride in the mountains this morning with my CEO, and not to brag too much on here, and this was not for the purpose of the podcast, but I really thought to myself, this is culture, right? This is
Yeah.
a real company culture, someone I enjoy spending time with, doing
Yeah.
something out in the fresh air that's not work related. And if it is, it's only one way because he's a lot fitter than me, so I can't really respond to his points when we're on the bike together. But
It's
yeah, I was
better for
really
the
looking.
career, maybe.
Pardon?
Nice.
Better for the career if he's.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah. Just
So
not.
that's a good segue then. So through your career, with all your experiences, right, to where you are now, what are the 3 things that you know now that you wish you'd known then?
I think one thing I say is a non-negotiable with me is being on time.
Okay.
And hand on my heart, I didn't know that when I started my career, how important that would be to everybody that you come across. If it's a nurse, if it's a doctor, if it's a teammate, if it's your boss, if it's someone who's in your team, it's always really important. Secondly, to look at yourself. I think I have a story that I tell people, and I don't know whether I should tell it on here because it's somewhat embarrassing. There was a light bulb moment for me when I was in Colombo with work, and obviously, well, not obviously, fantastic place to visit, but I was with work, and we were walking between the distributor's office and a hospital. And I thought to myself, I wonder if anyone else has walked this pavement wearing an Armani suit, which is what I was wearing at the time. And then I thought about that question a few times before, and I thought to myself, what an idiot you are. Not thinking about who I am, where I am, what I'm doing, what I look like to other people, thinking only about myself and how I carry myself in other situations. That adaptation or ability to adapt to other cultures has really carried me really far in life. And
Really important.
thirdly, be careful where you work. I think always work with people first. For me, people first, technology second, and nothing else really matters. But the people are just so important that you work with. The way I got my role now with BHS was pretty perfect in the sense that I was introduced to the CEO, Mike, by a friend and former colleague, and we were able to get to know each other over a period of time before the opportunity came up. So I was really confident in our relationship before I took that. And that's super lucky, and you don't normally get that. But I'm normally a pretty good judge of character. So making sure you make those correct judgments and working with great people is absolutely key. Not the job title, not the salary, not the car, it's the people.
Absolutely. Not the car, not the salary, not the job title. That's the wrong thing to focus on.
Yeah.
That's such good advice. Really, absolutely brilliant.
Good.
Fantastic. So, Peter, you've had a fascinating career and you will continue to have a fascinating career. I think you're doing an amazing job at BHS. I mean, our paths keep crossing.
They do.
And long may they continue to do so. I'm hoping we will at some point both work together somewhere.
Yeah, maybe.
Or
Where
maybe the
would
three
that
of
be,
us.
Cash? Let's take it. If we've got a minute, let's imagine we could start a company together, or we can join a company together. What would that company look like?
Oh, well, it will be high-end technology,
Definitely.
for sure. There would definitely be a computer between the physician and the patient that would probably be doing AI and AR, and it would be market changing. It would change the way medicine is practiced.
Okay.
And I think changing the way medicine is practiced is the thing that the three of us have in common, right? That's what we've done our entire careers and I would say for the better. Changing the way medicine is practiced for the better is what we do. That is our job in a nutshell, right? And bringing new technology to the market, bringing stuff that many senior physicians never even thought about when they were at school learning medicine. And we make it part of their everyday practice for the benefit of them and their patients and the healthcare system. So whatever we do is going to tick all those boxes because that's the core essence of who we are, right?
I agree. I wouldn't have been able to articulate that as well as you did, Cash, and haven't given myself often enough the time to stop and think about what we do and how we impact the industry that we work in. So it was nice to hear that from you because you're right. That's what we do. I do it because I enjoy it and often get caught up in the here and now and the deadlines and the quarter ends and the blah, blah, blah. And don't often think of it like that. But you're absolutely right.
That's what you're doing every day when you're working at BHS. You're changing the way medicine is practiced.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Such a rewarding thing to do.
Indeed. Definitely.
Get you out of bed.
Definitely.
So this is the first time that the one we are interviewing, is closing this interview with a question.
Oh, God, I'm sorry.
Congratulations.
That's what I told you. He's an amazing guy. We have to get him on. Fantastic. Peter, thank you so much for your time. It's been a fascinating conversation. I hope super helpful and inspiring for people who are either looking to get in industry or in the industry and looking to do more. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Well, Silke, Cash, thank you so much for the invitation. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm really grateful to you both for inviting me and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you for tuning into our MedTech Lives. You have been listening to Zilka Riemer and Cash Ikram. We're committed to bringing you insights and stories that inspire and inform the medical community. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network.